Episode 10, We. Day 50 began with a sky so clean it looked ironed. The ledger wrote Day 50 in a hand that might as well have been embroidery, and beneath it, begin with lullaby. End with rule. We walked our loop because muscle remembers better than courage. Milk on hinges, lime on seams, bells to wrists, drones up and bored. The wee knot lay under its stripe like a tendon we had learned not to show off. At dawn, we did the final echo walk. No speeches. Flag cleat, 1. Rail, 2. Stairhead, 3. Ramp lip, 4. Gate hinge, 5. Grate, 6. Bright room skirting, 7. Count rolled like a cartwheel and didn't ask us for poetry. The echo rose where the old loop used to bite and sat in the crossbrace of the wee knot as if it had always known that shelf. The ridge turned its leaves toward us and then away, as if admitting it was out of arguments. We brought the weight to the apron without opening anything. Double ring chalked ugly. Not a mouth loud on the lip. Bowl upside down at north. Ground line clipped. Milk coins bloomed on hinges. The water lifted into skin and wrote one word we had already earned. We. Then it flattened like a bed made properly and gave us back the morning. Chairs filled the courtyard by 10. Rows measured with string and patience, so aisles made sense to wheelchairs, weather, and nerves. Blankets folded along the front benches where elders sit when they need courage and shade. The stone wore a wax sheen and the color of rainwater in old letters. Lullaby, later chalked in 3 languages on the music block window. The felt inside the panel kept the room honest. The sign, ear not string, kept us honest about the felt. No microphones. No stage beyond a low platform made of boards Naidu swore by, and Jonas had stopped trying to make elegant. Town arrived in their best quiet. The choir parents wore bell straps for fun, not policy. Children traced the stone's blank margin with 2 fingers before they took their seats, as if you could borrow stillness like you borrow a jacket. Khumalo stood where we could all read her mouth. We begin with work, she said, and no one clapped because it wasn't that kind of sentence. She pointed to the bulletin. Walked dawn, final, no openings, count holds. She pointed to the stone. We will not prove love by opening. Then she pointed to us. We can sing lullabies today, off the ground, bells on wrists for joy. We do not sing to prove anything. We do not open to prove anything. We carry. The first lullaby was almost nothing. 1 voice, then 2, not touching earth. Feet on stools, palms resting on knees. A grandmother counted 3, 2, 4 before she began, teaching her breath how to behave in public. Someone cried without making it anybody else's drama. Children leaned their heads against shoulders and watched the sky do its job. The panel stayed quiet. The gutters offered nothing but drainage. Set. We ate because eating is how people survive ritual. The quiet got deeper instead of thin. The Tokoloshe left a safety pin at the yard brick alongside 3 crumbs, and Sifo fastened it to his collar like a medal until the day was over. Afternoon drifted toward evening with the kind of humility you only see in weather that lost an argument once and remembers. Khumalo raised her hand, not for silence, for attention, and we stood in a shape we had practiced for weeks. Houses at the rim, town elbows out in the aisles, drones high, milk warm, lime ready. The shrine we don't make is the apron we prepare correctly. Duba took his chair near the ring and let his hat hang from his fingers, as if it were punctuation he didn't need anymore. Last receipt, Khumalo said. We bring what we can carry without opening. We carried the wee knot down, coils dressed like patience. We laid it inside the outer ring where every hand could see it and no mouth could mistake it. We set the short length of chain, pocked by lightning 10 years old, on a trestle. We lifted the felt square that had tamed a panel. We set the rescission on the west mark, the one where truth belongs, and the old work order stamped designate under rumor. We poured milk. We stepped sunwise. Ask to speak, Khumalo said. The surface lifted into skin that didn't make a face. What's left of him wrote itself like budget lines. Not a hunger, a list. We answered with work so exact it felt like prayer. Wet reed before iron, I said. Count 3 on the rap, Busi said. Breathe through heat. 3, 2, 4, Kwanda said. The thread under his skin brightened and cooled the way a person nods without spending their neck on theater. Tie outward to inward, leave no tail, Thandi said. Sun last, Khumalo said. Witness small. Town repeated it plain, the way people repeat an address they never want to forget. Elbows out made a corridor. Flat kept the sky honest. Milk shined where hinges pretend to be important. Lime bit the places a mouth might dream. That was when the old story tried for its encore. It came down the slope like a favor you should never accept. A pressure aimed at the seam between his wrist and my jaw. The door every lazy god tries. Want was there. Habit was there. Love was there, waiting to be used wrong. We declined in the language we paid for together. I breathed 3, 2, 4, the way a hand had taught. He didn't spend a second touch. We both said the sentence that keeps us. We will not prove love by opening. The pressure did what bad ideas do when no one gives them the furniture they want. It went looking for a poster to admire itself in, and found none. The surface wrote the last word it owed us. We. In. Then it appended the only lines that mattered. Designates hold closed. Keep the work. Release the story. Stone stands. Sun last. Witness small. Not a mouth. We didn't bow. We packed the trowel the way people put babies to sleep. Competent, unafraid, and we carried the wee-knot up the slope sunwise with the palming grace of a team who have stopped trying to make their gods clap. Evening put gold on the edges of chairs and made the bell straps look like jewelry. People took blankets on their knees and let children stand on their shoes. Thandi lifted her hand and let the first lullaby find air. It did what lullabies do when they are allowed to be small. They kept time from running off. Someone started to sing to a baby whose hair still smelled like soap. Somebody else sang back without calling it a duet. The drums stayed off the ground. The panel remembered to be a wall. The gutters remembered to be gutters. I felt him before I saw him, which is a sentence that should be poetry and is just truth. He came to where I sat at the aisle end. Witness in a cheap wooden chair, pen-capped, jaw cheap. And he didn't ask a question I couldn't answer. He stood where the route meets the habit. He rested his palm on the top of my chair back, not a second touch, not even close to one. Presence. Policy with heat in it. After the count, he said, the way a man might say after this roof is on. With law, I said, which is not romantic and is the only way I know how to be romantic now. He didn't step closer. I didn't. The wanting did what it has been trained to do. It lay down and waited, perfectly alive. The last lullaby was the one the town knew in its bones without needing words. Thandi nodded at the sky. People stood, feet up on stools, palms on knees, bells on wrists, for joy, not law. We made a sound that never touched earth and never asked for proof. It lifted a little and hung there like wash on a good line on a dry day. Then it folded itself back into silence without looking at us for approval. Khumalo closed us the way she opened us, with work. Rules stand, she said. We carry. We do not open to prove love. We keep this wall boring. We lay the wee knot at festival for 7 rain seasons. We maintain felt and lips and grids and chalk. We count when the ridge turns its leaves. We let the stone remember so our mouths don't have to. No applause. We cleaned up chairs. We rolled blankets. Someone swept chalk dust into a pan, and then, because it's us, wrote "not a mouth" on the pan before emptying it. Night found us sitting in our doorways anyway. We are people with thresholds now. He placed his palm to my frame once. I matched it on the other side of the wood. The house breathed 324 for us both. The want held still, which is one of the bravest verbs I know. Tomorrow, he said. He meant nothing urgent. He meant psalms made of checklists, drones with sleepy batteries, lime stripes that fade and get redone, students who need to be taught how to leave end caps alone and how to polish posters instead of pulls. He meant life. Tomorrow, I said. I meant rules that are a place to sit down. Come with me to the board, he said finally, quiet, like a man asking someone to sign a sensible contract. We went. 2 adults with a building between them instead of a rumor. The kids had left the chalk. Naidu's handwriting shouted chairs back and hose cupboard shut and wax stone after sun. Over it all, the river's text sat like a roof. We added our line on a corner where chalk goes to become law. Esona and witness Zulu Kwanda son, partnering by rule. Term son last, witness small, no second touches in surge, bells on wrists at school, count before heat. Work first. No one cheered. People just read and carried their chairs. That's the kind of acceptance you can use. The first days after looked like what grown happiness actually is. Naidu finding a hairline at the chapel hinge and showing 3 kids how to milk it without making a poem. Lerato teaching a first year to measure poster corners with the level until the world exhaled. Jonas grinding a lip flat on a backstage door and writing ear not string inside the case because some men write their vows on metal. The museum woman came with new wax and left with a box of biscuits because you pay experts even when they won't let you. We walked the echo when weather practiced. We counted out loud like people who like being alive. The river wrote we in small ripples sometimes, the way ledger clerks add ticks to a page because good things deserve hash marks. The we not stayed rope. The stone weathered. The gym bleachers felt survived 3 games and a celebration. The music block did not try to be a throat. The hose cupboard remembered it wasn't a mouth because a child had written it there with the kind of conviction chalk always wanted. He and I kept our one touch and our law. Sometimes his shoulder rested against the frame an extra beat, and then withdrew like a tide that had learned manners. Sometimes I breathed 324 out of habit and watched the house match me because the house has learned to love us back in the only way it can, by staying within its job. One evening, just because work had been beautiful that day, we walked the long way past the stone. He touched the blank margin with 2 fingers. I did too. We didn't read aloud. We didn't need to. We had the sentences by heart and in our bones. He carried, we eat our part now. We will not prove love by opening. Sun last. Witness small. Not a mouth. We went back to our doorways and did the bravest thing people do after a miracle. We kept living like the miracle had to be paid in small coins, every day, with chalk and milk and elbows and breath. The ridge turned its leaves the right way. The river kept her front door locked. The campus smelled like biscuits and iron and felt. And if there was a music in it, it was the kind that doesn't need a throat. The sound of a place choosing to be a place. That's our last scene. A courtyard full of chairs, a stone that remembers so we can build new things, a rope that learned to be we, and 2 people who stood up in the middle of a town and called their love by its correct name, work, and found it was strong enough to hold. Rule holds. We hold. Rain came 2 days after day 50, honest and vertical, the kind that makes leaves show their clean undersides, and boys run with shirts over their heads. The stone took the water like a grown thing, letters beating and shedding. Boosie and the wax crew stood under a tarp and watched their work do its job. When it was over, children came past with the ritual they invented for themselves. 2 fingers to the blank margin, not the grooves, and walked on as if they'd borrowed stillness and returned it. We kept our loop. There isn't a day after the last day. There's the next day. Milk for hinges, lime for seams, drones up and board. The we not lay under its stripe like a tendon that only flexes when the body asks. The council clerk delivered a copy of the new charter with pride he didn't try to hide. It was practical, not pretty. Houses as custodians, drones and ledgers named as witnesses. The we not rite at each festival for 7 rain seasons. Sun last, witness small. The sentence we carved into stone written into policy where budgets live. He handed it to Khumalo as if he were passing a child across a river, and she filed it without ceremony, because ceremony had already done its part. Dube came at dusk, hat in hand, and sat by the stone without asking anyone's permission. He didn't speak to it. He spoke to a boy who wasn't here anymore in the language of quiet men. He put his hat down, he pressed his thumb to the margin. He breathed 3, 2, 4 until his own chest stopped making a mouth of itself. Then he stood up and walked home with his hands visible. That's as close to absolution as a town gets. The Lerato started a quiet school of her own. Posters and hush. She'd show a child a page and a rule. Corners square, level true, no songs. When needed, ear, not string always. Don't fix pulls, she'd say. Fix the way people look at walls. She laughed more now, a neat laugh that didn't ask for attention. Jonas taught felt and door lips like a man making furniture out of his own penance. Sometimes they argued in the workshop about glue and patience and the dignity of ugly, and the argument always ended with the same sentence. Not a mouth. They liked that sentence the way some people like tea. Caletzo's bell wrist's table became a post more than a station. He wasn't a guard anymore. He was a habit. Kids stopped to let him tie a strap even when there was no count to keep. It was a superstition that worked. On exam days, they drew not a mouth on their hands without looking around to see if adults approved. The building exhaled like a fridge. Honest, unromantic, constant. We took the Echo for a walk when the ridge turned its leaves. Not because we were afraid, because we liked being alive. It lifted easy now and sat on the cross brace like a parcel shelved correctly. We counted out of affection. At the apron, the water wrote "we" in small ripples sometimes, the way a ledger clerk makes a tick just because good things deserve hash marks. N. In the bright room, the cabinet slept. Lime wore its age like work clothes. The ledger got playful the way diligent things do when they finally trust their job. It doodled boxes around rule holds, and once, as if it couldn't help itself, wrote nice next to ear, not string, when Lerato squared a poster while whistling under her breath, and then remembered and stopped and laughed at herself. That we did what grown happiness looks like. Repaired the chapel door before it squeaked. Waxed the stone before it needed it. Trained first years in elbows out with a game that made them silly and correct. A child wrote the litany upside down under a desk and then righted it. A teacher taped lullaby, later in her classroom, and meant it. Some afternoons, town would gather without announcing itself. Baskets, babies, blankets. Someone would start a lullaby just because the courtyard wanted it. Feet on stools, drums off ground, bells on wrists for joy. It never turned into a choir. It never tried to make a god look up. It floated and landed and folded itself away like laundry on a good day. The gutters approved by remaining gutters. He and I kept law like people who had decided not to be tragic. Our one touch lived at the doorframe. Sometimes his shoulder rested against the wood an extra breath and then withdrew as if we'd both heard a chime that told the truth and didn't need witnesses. There were evenings we walked the long way past the stone and touched the blank margin as if it were a signature we'd promised to write every day. We didn't read the carved words aloud. They live in the mouth wrong. We carried them in hands. When it was time to be more than doorframe, we did that with law too. We went to Khumalo with our plan, which sounded like a timetable because that's what love should sound like in a place that kitchened us this long. After count, after drills, with rules posted where we sleep. Not in the bright room, not near rails. We wrote it down like 2 adults. Sun last, witness small, count before heat, no second touches in surge, Bells on wrists at the academy. Work first if anything hums. She read it and didn't smile because indulgence ruins good things, but her eyes had the light of a teacher whose class did its homework. Chairs, she said. Always put a chair between you and stupid, even when you're happy. We wrote chair in the margins with a box around it, and then we did something braver than kissing. We fetched a chair. There's a small house at the edge of town that used to belong to a librarian who moved to Durban. It has a stoep that understands the weather and a kitchen that refuses to be clever. We rented it with our own money because public love wants private furniture. We stocked it with sensible dishes and a level, chalk, milk in the fridge. A felt square folded in a drawer like a promise. On the first weekend after the charter went into town minutes, we took the walk nobody can take for you. Down the corridor, past the stone, past the chapel, past the hose cupboard that knows its name, off campus, elbows out, hands empty. At the stoep, we did what we do. Placed a chair where a picture window might like to be dramatic. Set a bell strap on the table because ritual fixes hands. Breathed 3-2-4 for the room because some rooms are new and need training like kind dogs. Then we stood in a kitchen and talked like people who can afford to be slow. We made tea. We ate 2 biscuits because somebody sent a tin. We looked at each other in a house that had no policies on the walls and then made some anyway because our bodies like rules when they mean we. N.A. When we finally put our hands on each other, it was not a conquest. It was a craft. Count before heat isn't an aphorism. It's a way to keep a person alive while you are loving them. He breathed 3, held 2, out 4, and so did I, and the house learned our measure. Son last is not an ego broken. It's a decision about what touches first. We. Witness small is not a diminishment. It's permission to let your mouth rest while your hands do correct work. His palm against the back of my neck felt like a proof laid where proofs belong. My mouth, small and exact, felt like a tool that had learned not to spill. We were careful the way carpenters are careful, tender the way welders are tender, patient the way a pot keeps a slow simmer. There were no gods to impress. There was a person. I cried the way good rooms leak when they've survived heat, and he held nothing twice unless it asked for it twice out loud. After, we laughed because laughter is breath with a roof on. We ate fruit over the sink. We looked at the chair and both said chair at the same time, and then found that funnier than it had any right to be. We slept under a window that didn't want to be a mouth, and woke at the hour when birds make the kind of music walls forget to steal. Love stayed in the bed, and the talk walked back to policy without feeling slighted. That's how you know a thing will last. And work didn't stop to admire us. The very next week, a welding seam at the far workshop tried to remember theater, and Naidu took 3 kids to teach them why lime is not a suggestion. We went with and held the bucket and didn't tell them a story about love. We told them where to put their elbows. The following month, a rain came sideways and someone forgot to wax the stone. It skimmed water for an hour and then drank it. We learned and waxed. The letters stayed sharp. A year from now, a new boy will try a Bluetooth speaker to make a point. And a new girl will put a level in his hand instead, and he'll be confused for 5 minutes and then proud forever. 7 rain seasons from now, the Weenot will have a patina that makes Naidu sentimental, and he'll chase someone with a rag and call it teaching. That's the shape I wanted to leave you with. The boring edge of miracle. Sometimes we still walk the long way. The spillway still has a lip that wants teeth, and we still chalk not a mouth across it when the letters fade. The river still writes, we on slow evenings, and once, only once, it wrote thanks. In a way that might have been coincidence if we were the kind of people who lived by coincidence. We aren't. Sometimes, in the house at the edge of town, we cook and leave the door open so the smell of onions and pepper can argue with the weather. We hang the bell strap on a nail because the bell isn't a threat anymore. It's a memory with manners. We write grocery lists like liturgies and pin them straight. We count 3, 2, 4 when nothing is on fire because bodies like rhythms, even when they're safe. We keep a piece of wet reed in a jar by the stove because there's always something in the world that needs binding to itself before the iron goes on. On the anniversary of day 50, the courtyard filled with chairs the way it knows how. Lullabies returned like birds that remember the feeder. Children clambered onto stools and sang into their grandparents' hands. The panel listened without envy. The gutters behaved. The wee-not slept under its stripe. It wakes only when asked now. The stone remembered for us again, and no one argued with it. At the end of the evening, we wiped the boards, rolled blankets, counted straps back into the crate. Khumalo wrote "We Year 1" on the board and underlined it twice. She's not sentimental. She's tidy with time. Dubé pressed his thumb to the margin again and walked home straighter. Lorato fixed a slant no one else could see, and then allowed herself one note of humming, which is what freedom sounds like when it has learned manners. Jonas put his hand on the music block panel and took it off again without sticking anything to it. Calypso locked the bell box and tucked the key in the place everyone knows to check. He put his palm to our doorframe when we got back, as he always does, and I matched it. The house breathed for us. Later we put our skin where rules allow, and the rules felt like sheets dried in sun. The city far off on the ridge blinked its indifferent lights. Our river kept her front door shut. The campus slept inside its job. Say, that's where I leave you. In a town that learned the difference between spectacle and work. In a school that decided boring saves, with a stone that does remembering, so mouths can do gentler things. With a rope that learned to be we, and with two people who called their love by its correct name and found it strong enough to hold walls and mornings both. If you need one last sentence to carry in your pocket, take the one that turned a season. We will not prove love by opening. Then add the one we woke up to every day after. Rule holds. We hold. Side story. The Mind That Wanted a Choir. Part 1. The Call Underground. The wind changed on a Wednesday. It came off the ridge, met the rusted headgear of the old Klein Vlei mine outside town, and made a sound that wasn't wind anymore. People said it was just sheet metal complaining. Lerato Maseko didn't like the way the sound chose a pitch. She had spent weeks teaching a building not to sing. She recognized a room looking for a throat. A WhatsApp voice note arrived in the staff group. Shaky laughter, then a hum from far below the speaker. "We're at Klein Vlei," a young man said, still trying to be brave on record. "It's nice down here. It answers you." Jonas was already picking up the felt roll. "We go now," he said. The rope scar across his hand had learned humility. His eyes had learned to ask. Khumalo didn't make a speech. "Standard kit," she said. "Chalk, lime, milk, bell wrists. No singing, no openings. Ear, not string. If the mind wants music, we give it manners." They drove out in a battered baki. Lorato, Jonas, Sifo, Water, Naledi with the remotes, and Auntie Dineo from the clinic who knew the mine's history in her bones. Bells tied to wrists only. 2 drones in a plastic crate. A coil of cable and wet reed wrapped in a cloth. A small iron bowl and ground line because you never regret having iron that remembers shut. The headgear rose out of thorn bush like a memory nobody wanted. Wind threaded it. The hum settled on E and tried to sharpen. The old hoist shed, door hanging, offered them a darkness that had learned how to bargain. "Rules," Lorato said so the rust could hear. "No singing. Bells on wrists. We don't touch twice. We mark mouths as not a mouth. In T. They walked the perimeter and wrote it everywhere a gap flirted. The winch slot, the vent louvers, the door sill, milk on hinges, lime across seams. Naledi sent Nandi 1 up to map tug, its streamer bent toward the shaft collar and held there like a pointing finger. A car pulled in behind them, trailing dust. 2 Technicon students climbed out, young, guilty, stubborn. "We only wanted to record the echo," the woman said, arms wrapped over her chest. "The room sings back. You clap and—" She didn't finish. The man swallowed. "Dabo dropped his phone," he said. He went one level down to fetch it. The stairs hum. It makes you want to go a little further. Auntie Dineo did not scold. Where? She said. He pointed at the ladder, then looked at his hands as if they betrayed him. They rigged simple. Chalk ring wide around the collar. Iron bowl upside down on a plate of ground, nisi, line clipped to a rebar stake. Milk coin on the pulley axle. Nandy too hovered at the lip, streamer taut as truth. The drone's hopper spilled filings into any place the wind tried to write rhythm. Ear, not string, Jonas told the shaft. He pushed felt strips into the vent slats and taped them ugly. The hum ducked and tried another path. Lerato peered down. The first platform was 20 rungs below, then a landing that didn't trust itself. Farther, the dark. She felt the mine listening for a throat to borrow. We're not going far, she said. We are not here for heroics. We are here to decline politely. They dropped a light. The glow swayed and caught a corner where someone had tied tinsel years ago and never untied it. That was all the mine needed. A memory of a party. Okay, Lerato said, snapping the litany into place like a level on a poster. We go 2 landings. If anything tries to help us, we say no. If anything hums, flat. If anything moves, ring, milk, mug. She went first. Jonas followed with felt and ties. Bells stayed on wrists. Naledi and Sifo kept the chalk and milk coming hand to hand. Auntie Dineo watched the students and made them useful by putting the milk jar in their care. Sass. The first landing performed the trick she knew. A hollowness at ear height where the wall had thinned under years of breath. She chalked not a mouth across it and pressed felt into the seam. The air grumbled and looked for new habits. They heard Tabo before they saw him. The wrong rhythm of a person who has been matched by a room. It answers if you hum down your throat, he called, breath hitching. It's like it knows harmony. It knows hunger, Auntie Dineo said. Come up, child. They rounded the second landing and found him on the third ladder, 1 foot 2 rungs down from sense. He was grinning like a tourist at a hymn. Lerato chalked a ring across his rung and said, clear and boring, stand. He stopped because a ring under your feet is louder than clever. Jonas clipped a mug at shin height because old ladders like knees. Hands where the room can count them, Lerato said. He did. The mine tried to make a cord from rail and rib and hopes. Thandi wasn't there, but Lerato had learned flat with her whole spine. She dropped it into the air like a heavy sheet. The cord melted and slid away. Don't talk to it, Lerato told Tabo. Talk to me. What's your grandmother's maiden name? He blinked, then gave it. Names are heavier than echoes. He let them haul him up and didn't make it a drama. On the way out, the mine tried its sweet trick. Pressure on the jaw, promise in the ears. Lerato felt the old itch, the one that makes you polish pulls to make them right. She said the sentence that saved schools and would save shafts. We will not prove love by opening. The pressure backed off, hungry and polite. At the collar, wind pushed a last key past the headgear. Nandy 2's streamer bent and settled. The hum fell a half step and sulked. Lerato wrote not a mouth across the collar lip and underlined it twice. Tomorrow, she said. We come back with a wee knot that fits metal. Jonas nodded once. He'd already started drawing a pattern in the dust with his boot. Outward to inward. Cross brace. Leave no tail. Ear, not string, he said again, not to her, to himself. The mind listened. It had learned the sound of a rule. Part 2. The descent that refused a song. They returned with a cable knot they'd built on the workshop floor. Retired hoist rope for the chain core. Ties of wet reed to keep iron from learning the wrong lesson. Felt sleeves at the contact points. Chalk marks where the sun touches last. They brought a short bar of old track with lightning pits in it and a square of panel felt. It wasn't a shrine. It was a kit. No crowd. Just the 5 from yesterday, plus Dubé. Hat in hand. Not to lead. To sit in a chair by the collar and witness someone else's repair. Laugh. They laid their law the way they do at home. Double ring chalked ugly. Bowl down and grounded. Milk coins on hinges and pulleys and the ridiculous tinsel hook. Not a mouth on the doorsill. Twice for the drama queens. Nandi 1 hovered high. Nandi 2 kept the lip honest. Bells on wrists, not ideas. And? Ask to speak, Lerato said. Half a smile, half a dare. You don't ask minds. You warn them what you intend to do. They set the cable knot just inside the ring. Jonas showed the ties, outward to inward. Counted 1, 2, 3 on the wrap, and left no tail. He stood back with his palms visible the way repentant men stand beside a job they aim to do well. Rote? Naledi asked. 7 holds, Lerato said, making a mine into a campus with her mouth. Headgear seam, hoist rail, stair corner, vent louver, winch bed, sump grate, collar lip, sun last, witness small. Count while we go. They did it like a drill someone had paid for with ugly impatience. One at the headgear seam, lime bruised deep into rust, filing spilled into ambitions, felt pressed against the plate ribs until the wind forgot to be clever. 2 at the rail, chalk under the joint, milk where the bolt pretended to be a hinge. 3 at the stair corner, ring under boots, mug where a shin would regret innocence. 4 at the vent, felt thick. Ear not string scrawled with a marker inside the louver so temptation could read. 5 at the winch bed, iron bowls line clipped to the old earth bond, because shut remembers shut. 6 at the sump grate, milk along the rim for humility and to keep small eyes from believing in openings. 7 at the collar lip, not a mouth underlined until even ghosts are embarrassed. The hum kept trying to arrange itself. Flat refused its shape. The echo the boys had raised slid toward we like a parcel that had always wanted a shelf. The cable knot accepted the weight without pretending to be art. Read the receipt, Auntie Dineo said. They spoke work, not story. Wet reed before iron. Count 3 on the wrap. Breathe 3, 2, 4. Tie outward to inward. Leave no tail. Sun last. Witness small. The wind pushed a last greedy key against the headgear. The felt sleeve swallowed it like good fabric swallows a draft. The mine wanted a final bite. It slid its hand toward the seam between Lerato's jaw and Jonas's wrist, the cheap door lazy gods pick. They'd trained for this without knowing. Lerato breathed 3, 2, 4, and the want in her chest, older than she liked admitting, sat down and behaved. Jonas didn't touch her. He didn't have to. It's a better magic when you don't need the second touch. And they lowered the cable knot 2 landings, not more. Inside, not bridging. They set chalk rings at the ladder rungs they had used, so the shaft would remember ordinary feet and not look for feet that sing. Nandi too watched the lip like a hawk with manners. The hum dropped another half step and turned into weather. At the 3rd landing, where yesterday's ache had been worst, the mine offered its old bargain again, a pressure with a voice hiding in it, just a little further. Lerato answered like a grown-up. Not today. Jonas pressed felt against the cheek of the air and taped it there with tape that wouldn't win any prizes. Ugly saved them like it always does. On the way up, a trick of wind tried to nick their ankles. Sifo put a coin of milk on the rung and rubbed it in with 2 fingers and a short prayer to everything that hinges. The trick ran out of enthusiasm. At the lip, the hum had stopped being a hymn. It had become a draft. Jonas set the track bar with its lightning scars on a trestle and touched the pits with a thumb that had learned to count regret and stop it useful. He carried, he said, not asking for a choir, speaking to the work. We eat our part now. Duba sat straighter in his chair and did not speak. Some receipts, you honor, by not adding adjectives. They seated the cable knot along the headgear spine under a stripe of lime, felt sleeves hugging metal where metal wants to gossip. Nandi 1's streamer, bored, finally hung like laundry. Nandi 2 drifted and decided the world was uninteresting. The mind did not applaud. It breathed like a fridge. Lorato signed the last sentence with chalk where mechanics like to read, not a mouth. Jonas added ear, not string underneath, because vows are better when the room can see them. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. The second touch is too expensive to spend on congratulations. He held the felt roll the way steady men hold their own names. She checked the level of the chalk line and found it true. V. At home, the ledger wrote the only line that belongs at the end of a job like that. Shaft calmed. Cable we seated. No openings. Rule holds. Under it, a smaller hand added something Lorato kept to herself and read once before closing the book. Nice work. In the weeks after, the Technicon kids came back with Auntie Dineo and repaired what they'd admired wrong. They taped felt to louvers. They painted not a mouth on the doorsill in letters only a grandmother could love. They tied a ribbon to the chair Dubé had used and left the chair there, not as a shrine, as furniture. People sit better where pride knows where to go. Sometimes the wind still tries a key on Kleinvlei's bones. It finds felt, lime, milk, and a rope that decided to be we. It goes looking for a chorus and finds a sign. The sign is rude and correct. Back at the academy, Lorato keeps a square of track felt on her desk. Jonas keeps a small coil of wet reed in a jar by his kettle. They teach what they learn down there the way they teach everything now. Exact hands, small mouth. If a student asks for the story, Lorato says, "No, we have receipts." Then she shows them where to put their elbows. When weather lifts its head and rooms remember their old bad ideas, people walk the anchors with bells to wrists, count 1 to 7, and refuse to be interesting. That's the whole trick. That's the side story. The mine wanted a choir. It got a corridor. And the town, having survived its own appetite for spectacle, learned the most expensive habit any place can learn. Ear, not string. Not a mouth. Rule holds.